Welcome to ecstatic yoga, cueing adjustments and modifications. And we will be using our analytics model to help us master our cueing and adjustments. I'm Grace, and with ecstatic yoga, so happy to have you with this class. We'll be talking about our analytics model of where we set our foundation first. Then, and this is where our body is connected to the earth. So it may be our feet in a standing pose. It may be our pelvis in a floor pose, or our hands and our feet, depending on the pose where our body is connected. It could be our sits bones. We're in a boat. And then we'll be moving into alignment, where we align the body. And then we move into some lines of energy to help us learning how to adjust and modify poses. And then once our alignment is done, what's our foundation, our alignment, our lines of energy, we move into engaging our bandhas, energy locks, and moving into breath, breathing into the pose. So in this class, we'll be covering cueing, adjusting, and offering some modifications. And we're going to be talking about personal presence for cueing students, and hands-on adjustments for yoga students, and modifying poses. So let's talk about personal presence and some guidelines for cueing your students as they're in their poses. To begin, I would like to talk about our personal presence as a yoga instructor. Your personal presence as a yoga instructor is that unsaid energy of connection with your students that will allow them to feel safe with you. We all have a voice of self-judgment and a voice of personal power within the same one mind. Ongoingly strengthening that voice of personal power, self-love, and acceptance is a practice for yoga instructors as we step into leading others. The more we feed our personal power, starve the self-judgments, the more powerfully we can lead others. Yoga is to yoke, to become one, to listen to the one voice, that voice of truth, that voice of peace, to know the deeper, unchanging, eternal aspect of what you truly are, is a part of the one unified mind, one with all life, for life, and with all life. It is a type of growing up, maturing into adulthood, to let go of listening to the part of the mind that judges and distorts the truth, and finally listening to the voice of empowerment. A great way to determine if you're listening to the voice of spirit or you're listening to the voice of ego is to know that anything the mind tells you that upsets your peace is coming from ego. The past, the future, interpretations, and judgments. If the voice within brings a sense of peace and alignment, truth about it, then you know you are listening to the voice of love, the voice of truth, the voice of self, God, God's self. It is time to listen to this one voice, the voice of truth, the voice of love, the voice of peace. Some ways to connect with personal power with your students is to get to know them, to point out positive things about them, provide affirmations, Be present. Be okay with the process. Be willing to express your authentic self. Becoming a yoga instructor, you will find your unique style. Speak from your heart. Teach what you know, what you love about yoga. You will allow a wisdom from within your soul to arise as you teach. Show your students your uniqueness and allow yourself to be as big as life itself. Your unique voice as a yoga instructor. Setting the space, creating a safe space, inviting a comfortable space. Choose music you love, music you believe your students will enjoy. Make sure the space is clean. Maybe have essential oils or incense so it smells good. And set the lighting to match the class. Be sure to let students know, especially new students, about your studio, where the restrooms are, where they can store their shoes and personal items, where the changing rooms, showers, and water are available. Build rapport with students. Show confidence by having your class prepared. Common ground. Let students become aware that you share common struggles, desires, and visions. Be relaxed and authentically enjoy connecting with your students. They will feel it. Share your story and personal style. Humor. Use humor to create a sense of relaxation, bringing in fun and spontaneity. Share new learning experiences and life lessons. Ask students about themselves. Invite students to think and connect lessons with their personal lives. Listen to students. Get to know them and do your best to fulfill their needs. Make your students feel important and valued. Use eye contact and good body language to make students feel welcome and safe. Demonstrating a pose. As you teach in front of a class of students, there are a few items that are helpful to ensure your class goes smoothly and the students get the best experience. Make sure you are visible, preferably so that all the students can see you. Sometimes this may be difficult. In that case, do your best to be visible to as many students as possible. And know you can also demonstrate a pose in the front of the room and later move and demonstrate the pose at another location. Name the pose as you demonstrate. Try to give both English and Sanskrit when possible. Demonstrate new or advanced poses first before inviting students to practice the pose. Invite the students to watch your body rather than your face as you demonstrate a new pose. Offer modifications or props for the poses. Use the same steps and prompts for instruction as you used in demonstration. Keys to verbal correction. Be sure you can see all your students and they can see you. Watch for students' responses. Are they getting into the pose correctly? Observe body language, eyes, facial expressions. Notice their state of being as well as the structure of the pose. Observe students from different angles without pacing or walking around the room too much. Notice the lines of energy in the body and catch anything that may be out of alignment. Use verbal corrections with an approving voice. Begin with verbal corrections for the foundation of a pose, where their body's connected to the earth. Kindly inviting them to adjust their body to move into the proper foundation for the pose. Once they correct themselves, add an approving statement. That looks great. Your foundation's perfect, much better. Offer verbal correction for alignment, kindly inviting them to adjust their alignment. Offer positive words for correcting alignment. You look great, beautiful alignment. Invite them to engage the lines of energies of the pose, inviting them to engage in their bandhas and add the breath. Group lessons. Occasionally in a yoga class, you can discuss a yoga lesson, either at the beginning or towards the end of class. Below are some suggestions for personal power in group lessons, group yoga lessons. Draw the group together and provide a short, informative lesson. Encourage presence with eye contact and engaging in comments and questions afterwards. Ask if everyone understands or if there are any questions or comments. Listen sincerely to comments and questions, repeating questions so the entire class hears. Guide the class to learn from one another. Express gratitude and appreciation for sharing and exploring together. Invite everyone to get involved. Some valuable comments. Thank you for that question. Has anyone else had a similar experience? Could you share more about that? What a great perspective. Can anyone else relate? In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras 2.46 states, Shriya Sukham Asanam, which means stability and ease in every pose. Guidelines for hands-on adjustments for yoga students. In this day and age, I find it better to protect myself as a yoga instructor and avoid hands-on adjustments. However, with proper insurance, students' permission, both verbal and written, both verbal and written, and done gently. Always adjusting people gently, correctly, and safely can help students to be guided to embody the pose more deeply. The intention of a hands-on adjustment can be to deepen the pose, to align the pose, to integrate and stabilize the pose, or even sometimes to help them back off from the pose. Benefits in adjusting students: correcting physical alignments of a pose, correcting safety precautions of a pose, assisting body ease and correct posture of yoga, assisting students in deepening into a pose, providing support for a student to engage the correct intention and line of energy of a pose, providing muscle memory for a pose, inviting a student to slow down and become more present in the pose, creating connection and support, helping a student to relax deeper into the pose. You can get the result of verbally cueing the student. Always try that first. Golden rule for hands-on adjustments. Always, always, at all times, receive the student's permission to touch and adjust them both verbally and written. So when your student comes to your studio, you want to make sure they sign a waiver where they're agreeing to hands-on adjustments. And then verbally, when you're in class, you're going to be asking permission for hands-on adjustments. So you want both written, in written form to protect yourself. And then everybody changes day to day. So you want their verbal agreement as well through asking them permission in class. Never touch a student without permission to do so. And when they decline, honor their decision. Don't make it mean anything. And have it in writing in their original paperwork they sign whether they agree to hands-on adjustments or not. So when you're in class and you're asking verbal permission, you can either ask students to opt in or opt out. So opting in would look like, quote unquote, I'll be providing hands-on adjustments today. Please raise your hand if you are wanting adjustments. And students will raise their hands, and if those that are okay with hands-on adjustments, and giving the student the opportunity to opt out at any time for any reason. Remember who raised their hands and who didn't. You may have a large class, so you're going to have to remember who is wanting adjustments and who are not. Let's see here. And remember, also, even those who raise their hands, it is important to know that students' moods can change, and from pose to pose. So even those who've raised their hands or you recently adjusted, get their permission as you approach them to hands-on adjust. If you see an opportunity to provide hands-on assistance, before you touch them, ask them, may I adjust you? Opting out. Some yoga instructors find it easier to offer students the ability to opt out of being adjusted. This can often be easier because there are often more students who are generally wanting to be adjusted than not. So there's less to remember. And opting out would look something like this. I will be offering hands-on adjustments during this yoga class today. Please raise your hand if for any reason you prefer to not receive assistance, and I will respect your space. That's an opting out. Knowing what to adjust. Don't play any guessing games when it comes to touching students, especially their bodies. Know exactly what needs adjusting and how you will do that before you even touch the student's body. If you are hesitant or unsure in any way, don't adjust your students. Not only could you hurt the student, also they can pick up on our hesitancy, and that would make them feel unsafe. So combination of touch and cueing are the ultimate, the best. A little goes a long way. No human being is needing too much unless you're in a private class. So you don't want to do the pose for the student. You only want to offer a very gentle touch to guide them into the proper alignment and to guide them a little more deeper into the pose, possibly. A gentle touch with a small amount of cueing will be more valuable than deeper alignment. Ultimately, your goal is that your student gains the muscle memory and natural knowing with only a small amount of cueing and adjusting and making hands-on adjustments. The body remembers far easier than the brain. Keep communication open during adjustments. Also, as you're adjusting, it is often helpful to let them know what you are doing and use verbal prompts. This will help the student you are assisting as well as the entire class. So if you're coming upon a person, make sure they see you and you invite them to square their hips, and you may ask them, may I give you a hands-on assist? And you can help them square their hips. And as you're adjusting the hips, reminding all the students, squaring the hips, you can say, and then all the students begin to square their hips. Invite the student to communicate with you. Often students need an invitation or otherwise wouldn't communicate. Ask them, how does that feel? Is it feeling better? Be sure to not get too engrossed in helping one student that you forget the rest of the class. It wouldn't work well if you were helping one student and the rest of the class was in an inversion upside down for far too long. So keep mindful of the student you are adjusting as well as the entire class as a whole. Be very positive and let students know it's fine. You totally approve if they opt out of hands-on assists, even if a student gave written permission to be adjusted. And if at the beginning of class, they don't raise their hand and don't opt in to receive massage, well, you have to honor that. And don't be offended. Don't make it mean anything. Don't take it personal. Give them full permission and full freedom and acceptance to choose either way. If it feels important, you can always talk to the student after class if you feel something is in between or they're struggling with something. It is best to adjust students from behind as a general. However, always approach a student where they can see you and they know you're there. If their eyes are closed or their eyes are relaxed and down, verbally cueing the class is a way to let the student know where you are. So as you're approaching a student to adjust them, you can begin to cue the whole class to breathe. And then they hear your voice. They know you're right there beside them. They're not going to be startled. So before you adjust a student, the golden rule, always state, may I adjust you? The student doesn't know. If a student doesn't know you are there behind them and you simply touch them without the permission, it could startle them. They could lose balance. They could fall. Once you receive permission, then it is okay to stand behind them and adjust the pose. Adjusting and assisting students is not about doing the pose for them, rather to offer a very gentle and guiding touch to help them more deeply embody the pose, that embody that foundation, that alignment, that line of energy. It is important to be highly sensitive to your students during an adjustment. And if you sense any resistance in your student, physically or energetically, it is best to back away and not provide any further hands-on assistance. As you guide your students into steps, the steps of each pose, you'll be guiding them first to set their foundation, then take the steps needed to move into a perfect alignment. And then we'll be moving on the lines of energy, and finally the bandhas and the breath. And allow them to hold the pose for a couple, 2, 3, maybe 4 breaths. So let's go into these principles of the pose, getting into a pose. The first is our foundation. So before adjusting anything, you will want to check your student's foundation. If the foundation is not correct, we don't adjust the foundation. And this is because they are connected to the earth. This is their grounding and their stability. So this is where we would verbally cue them to correct their own foundation. It is important because the foundation is where the body is connected to the earth. And if we barge into their space and move a body part connected to the earth, it can be unsettling for a human being. It could cause problems to move a student at a location where their body is grounded on the earth. Things like they could lose balance, they could stumble or fall. It could cause them to feel startled or unsafe. This is where verbal cueing is appropriate. Alignment. So we've got our foundation. We're just going to verbally cue if something's off in our foundation. We're not going to be moving their body and disrupting where they're connected to the earth. Alignment. So now we've checked the foundation and we've given them verbal cues if they were out of the perfect foundation. And now we're going to look at the student's alignment. Once the student's foundation is stable and you have cued them into alignment, it is time to check if their alignment is correct. This is where you can adjust the pose with a gentle touch. If you receive permission, of course. However, there will also be many opportunities where it may be better to verbally cue the student to find the correct alignment rather than touch, hands-on assists. An example would be Virabhadrasana 1 or 2 or lunge, and you notice your student has their knee forward of the ankle. This would be an opportunity to invite them with cues to move their knee back in proper alignment so it is directly over the ankle. Obviously, there are places in a student's body where you will never touch, private and sensitive areas. Therefore, it is always important to be sensitive and mindful as you adjust students. Once you learn the analytics of poses and learn the alignment for each pose, it becomes simpler to adjust. So we're going to talk about a few hands-on adjustment opportunities. Mountain pose, Tadasana. So you can verbally cue the student through the loops for perfect postural alignment. And this is where you could use a very short little hands-on in the loops. The shoulders, you can help them to bring the shoulders back, shoulder blades together. Just a gentle touch, dropping those shoulders away from the ears. Warrior 1, Virabhadrasana 1, or lunge, Ajane Asana. You can assist students in squaring their hips. This is where you would come behind and gently square those hips. Triangle, Trikhanasana. You want to make sure the body is in one plane. So if an arm's out and you could just move that into the same plane, gently guiding any areas into the one plane. And you can provide a gentle pull up to the sky with that extended hand and fingers. It's just enough for the body to come into that one plane. Virabhadrasana 2. Sometimes students will move their body forward as they're gazing over those front fingertips, and you can gently guide their torso to neutral. Pigeon. Watch so the student doesn't roll over onto their hip, and gently guide the hip up so that it is balanced and suspended in a neutral position. Bridge, if students move their knees, they start to come out. You can gently guide them back into hip width distance. Camel, if your students' hips are not over the knees, you can gently touch to invite the hips forward to move into alignment over the knees. Lines of energy. So now we have moved from alignment to lines of energy. This is last to verbally cue or offer a hands-on adjustments. So we always want to go in order, the foundation first, and then their alignment, and then last, their line of energy. Each pose, especially the standing pose, have a distinct line of energy or intention. And a very gentle verbal cue or touch can assist the student to engage the line of energy. Example adjustments for lines of energies. And where we want to be careful as we're adjusting lines of energy that we don't take the student out of their alignment. So lines of energy and alignment are a little different, and we don't want the line of energy to take them out of alignment. But we're always adjusting our alignment as we move through the pose. So Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. You can very gently guide your students' extended fingertips out away from the body to show that line of energy. Down dog, you can gently bring the quadriceps back and up. Side angle, gently bring the extended fingertips up, also opening that hip. Now back, any kind of back bend like bridge or camel, fish, you can gently tap that sternum and ask them to open their heart and expand the heart, because on back bends, we're always their heart openers. So if somebody's closed down, can just tap and allow them, never touching the breasts, of course, to open that heart and have those shoulders back. So modifications. So I'm going to give you some modifications for some of the major poses that we talk about in our warrior flow, our sun salutation and floor. And then I'll give you a few modification poses. So mountain Tadasana. Some modifications are to widen the stance for balance, feet a little further than hip width apart, and micro bending the knees. Forward fold Uttanasana. They can bring the arms down to blocks to raise the floor up. They can clasp the hands behind the calves. They can hold the elbows while they're hanging forward. Some of these modifications will be to make the pose a little easier, and some of these modifications are to deepen the pose for the student. As you're hinging down from a Tadasana into your Uttanasana, there's a few variation modifications. You can either have the hands way out into angel wings. You can either have them right into the body, close, or onto the hips. But you don't want the arms out front because that puts pressure on the low back. So those are options, modifications. Lunge, Ajna Asana. You can invite them to drop into a low lunge so they can bring their knee down. Some arm variations is the arms can be overhead. They can be overhead into a back bend. They can be clasping behind the back, or you can be in a low lunge with the hands on, or you can be in a lunge with the hands on the floor. The knees are up, but the hands are on the floor. Down dog, Uddha Mukha Svanasana. Bending the knees. You can bend those knees a little bit in your down dog if you need. Use a wall. Use blocks if you need. Use a chair. Three-legged dog would be a deepening of it, lifting one leg to the sky. Chaturanga Dandasana. You can drop down to your knees for a low chaturanga. Come down with your knees on the floor. Up dog, Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. You can have your thighs on the floor. Cobra, Arda Bhujangasana. You can rise up only slightly. So even in a baby cobra, you don't need to go up as high. You can just use those back muscles to lift up slightly. You can also place the forearms on the floor. So modifications for the warrior flow. Warrior 2, Virabhadrasana 2. You can adjust those feet a little closer for a little bit of ease. Can bring them further apart for a little more challenge. Using blocks. Come to the knee for low warrior. Reverse warrior Vaparita Virabhadrasana. You can narrow your stance by bringing the feet closer together. You can also bring them further apart to challenge yourself a little more. You can bring a knee down to the floor for a low reversed warrior. Side angled Utthita Parvankonasana. You can bring your knee down to the floor. Can bring the arms resting on the front thigh. They can either be, so there's some options. Your arm can rest on the very gently on that front thigh. You can bring that hand down to a block or the floor instead by the shin. Also, you can narrow or widen that stance. Triangle Trikhanasana. Use a yoga block for that lower hand. It's on the earth. And you can bring hand higher up onto your leg. Revolved triangle, Utthita Trikhanasana. Use a low yoga block for that hand that's connected to the earth. And bring a hand higher up onto your leg. So pyramid, Parsvottanasana. Use a block for pyramid. You can bring the arms behind the back. Warrior 1, Virabhadrasana 1. Narrow the stance. You can bring those feet closer together for better balance and ease. Arms can be straight up. They can be arched, bending back for a slight back bend. Fingers can be clasped. You can be holding the elbows behind your back. You can lower those knees to the floor. 5-pointed star, Udhita Tadasana. Narrow the stance. Bring those feet closer together. Goddess. You can use a higher squat. You don't need to squat down so low if it's more to make it a little more easy. You can squat way low to deepen and bring more challenge to the pose. You can bring the feet closer together, a little bit less, not as wide a stance. You can bring those hands in towards yourself or out towards the world. You can come up onto your toes. You can pulse in and out of your squat. Wide leg forward fold. Prasarita Badakanasana. You can use a block as you come down to the floor instead of the floor, and bring a block to bring that floor up. You can narrow your stance. You can grab your elbows to deepen. And then you can go to side to each foot to bring in some stretch for the inner thighs. Some modification for some floor poses. Camel Ustrasana. You can put a blanket under the knees. You can tuck those toes to bring those heels up a little higher, bring the earth up a little higher. Child's pose. You can spread those knees wider, especially if you're pregnant. You want to really widen those knees, let the belly, room for the belly to drop in. Or you can have the knees together. Rest the arms out in front or alongside the body. You can have a blanket under the knees. You can have a bolster under your stomach and rest on the bolster. You can rest your head on blocks or you can use your fists. You can curl your toes. You curl the toes under. Single leg forward fold, Janu Shriyasana. Folding forward with arms extended overhead. You can put a block under the folded knee if it's coming up off the earth. You can rest the hands on the upper leg. You don't need to go down, fold forward quite so far. Blanket under the knees. You can bend that back. You can bend the knee a little. That knee that's extended in front, if you need to bend that up a little bit. Butterfly, Badakanasana. You can bring those hands under the feet. You can put a cushion under the outer thigh. Place the elbows on the thighs and press the thighs down, helping them down to the floor. Balancing bear, Dandasana. Can raise up one leg at a time rather than having them raised up together in a balance. You can hold it longer or shorter. So you could just hold that balance for just one breath rather than 2 or 3. You can bend the knees. Don't have to have those knees perfectly straight. Always want a little micro bend, but you can have them bent if it's more difficult. That brings a little ease. Boat pose, Paripruna Navasana. So you can move into half boat. It's more important to maintain a straight spine than straight legs. You can hold the backs of the thighs to maintain a straight spine. You can use a strap and place a strap under the soles of the feet. Grip the ends of the strap with your hands while raising the legs. And then you can press against the strap with your flexed feet. Spinal Rocks. You can roll back to the upper back, not all the way back to the back of the head. Bridge pose, Chaturanga Dandasana. You can use a block between the knees to keep them hip width apart. You can go into half bridge instead of a full bridge. A supported bridge by bringing a cushion or a block under the sacrum. And your arms can either be just alongside your body, or they can be clasped underneath you with the shoulders rolled under, with those coming up onto the shoulders, and shoulder blades are coming together. Knees to chest, Apanasana. And this one you can hold the hamstrings if the knees are sensitive. Half shoulder stand pose, Arda, Sarvangasana. So you can simply lay down on your back and elevate the legs. You're still getting the benefit of the inversion. The veins are still getting that vacation, but you're not moving yourself fully into that half shoulder stand. Plow pose, Halasana. You can use a folded blanket for your shoulders. Rest the head 2 to 4 inches below, lower than the shoulders. You can use a block or blanket for your feet to land behind plow pose. So if you're bringing those feet back and you're wanting them to come all the way down to the earth, you could have a blanket or a block they could come to bring that earth up a little bit. I like to keep, I was bringing my feet to the floor for several years until I took some classes, and it's much better protection for the lower back to just keep those feet parallel to the floor in our plow rather than hinging them all the way down to the floor. So the block option would be good, or just holding them parallel. You can also bring them into a V. And okay, so fish pose, Matsyasana. So you can have a blanket under the shoulders or the hips for your Matsyasana. You can also have, if there's strain in the neck, you can also put a pillow under the neck. You can bring arms up in front of the chest, palms touching. Knee, you can bring the knees up. Usually we guide you to have the knees straight, but you can have the knees up a little and bent. That's better. And some people even like to cross their legs for different sensation in their Matsyasana. Supine knee down twist. Use a block under the knee while in full twist. So that knee that's coming over, you can rest that onto a block. You can do an eagle twist with one foot crossing over the other. Happy baby, Ananda Balasana. You can use your peace fingers to hold the big toes when the legs are raised. You can use a blanket under the head. You can use a strap under the soles of the feet, gripping the ends of the strap with the hands gently and pulling down the knees into the armpit, never pulling them into the ribs. So now I'm just going to give you some modified poses. So every student's body is different, and therefore modifications for yoga poses is a valuable tool in teaching yoga classes. It can be the difference between a student doing a pose or not. Using blocks or other props, widening or narrowing stance, using a blanket, under the knees or elsewhere, are all very simple ways to modify yoga poses so a student can feel more comfortable and move more easily into the pose. So we've talked about the modifications with props and blocks. And now we are going to talk about just a few modified poses. So you can do seated or supine cat-cow instead of cat-cow and table. This eliminates some weight on the wrists, takes pressure off the knees and low back, elevates the hips. The pelvic contact with the floor helps spinal movement happen from the tailbone up. Supine child's pose takes pressure off the knees, protects those with herniated discs, and takes pressure off the ankles. Seated pigeon pose, sometimes called the 4 pose, creates a stretch in the hips that is less intense than traditional pigeon pose, takes pressure off the knees and rotator muscles of the legs by elevating the hips. Supine crow or crane pose, that takes weight off the wrists, reduces chances of pain in the shoulder and rotator cuff for those with shoulder injuries. This can develop core and upper body strength without the fear of falling out of balance. Reclined bound angle or reclined Badakanasana, and you can also use a blanket. Ankles are protected and neutral with the soles of the feet together. Less stress on the knees and hips, and it elevates the knees and shins. A supported wheel pose rather than a full back bend lessens the intensity and challenge and potential for back strain, allows for more ease, stabilizes the knees, and prevents them from spreading. Elevates the hips, supports lengthening, creates space in the lumbar, and takes weight off the mid body. Side angle while kneeling. Kneeling creates more ease in the pose, supports balance, stabilizes the legs and hips. Holding the ankle helps knee alignment over the ankle. Equal lengthening of the torso on both sides. Revolved chair pose with a block. Helps eliminate rounding of the spine by raising the ground to meet you with a block. Using the block rather than the elbow into the knee supports core engagement and protects the SI joint. So over time, you'll learn more and more of these modifications. They'll become more and more natural. And remembering that teaching yoga is a journey. Take it step by step. Gaining your voice of empowerment. This comes with practice. Learning how to adjust poses is best done one pose at a time. Mastering poses one by one. Modification in poses will always present themselves and be helpful to your students. Before long, you will have many poses that you can masterfully cue, adjust, and modify. Be kind to yourself on this journey you're learning, and know you don't need to have it all mastered to be an amazing yoga instructor. Enjoy the journey. Thank you for being here with me for this class on cueing, adjusting, and modifications. I'm Grace, and wishing you a most beautiful and most blessed day. Namaste.